Hello and welcome to Crushing Doubts Q&A every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here, as always, to talk about mind-body issues. And I always like to start by defining what that is, especially for people who are just tuning in. A mind-body issue is when something is going on in your mind, whether it's a feeling state or a thought, and that changes what's going on in your brain, which then changes what's going on in your body. Now, the most basic mind-body conditions are very garden variety experiences, like crying, for example. You get sad, your body changes, your tear ducts change. Blushing is another example of it. You get embarrassed, the blood flow in your body changes straight to your face, usually your face, and there you go. You got blushing. So those are everyday kind of experiences. But what happens when that mind-body experience gets out of control and just continues? Well, that is what happened to me, and I didn't know it at the time, but I ended up with 8 years of chronic back pain. Those who follow me know this story, and so I apologize for repeating it, but it can be very important for people who are just tuning in to know that I know what this is like, and a lot of the people who are tuning in are having experiences like this right now and trying to get out of the pain, and I want to encourage them they can. I didn't think that I could either until I got the right information. So that's what this show is all about. I do a Q&A because in trying to get out of my pain, I discovered the works of Dr. John Sarno, and that was incredibly crucial for understanding mind-body reality and for getting hope that I could get better. And it even got me some of the results, but I did need more answers. And so that's what this Q&A is designed for, is I found that actually in getting better, a huge part of it was bringing down my doubt about the whole thing, feeling certain that I could get better, feeling certain about what was happening. And to do that, I needed to ask my questions and I needed to get my questions answered. So that's what we're here to do. You guys will ask the questions. I'm going to answer them to hopefully to your full satisfaction. But I want to encourage you, if you ask a question and I answer it and you want to know more, follow up. Because if you're left with questions, your brain, you take your brain with you everywhere you go. And that brain is repeating a physiological process, whatever it's believing, whatever you're believing, and you need answers. So I'm here to provide them. I'll get into that in a second, how we're going to do that. Let me say a couple of quick hellos. Cherry, Lala Kingsbridge is here. C-Jet has joined. JPlant65 is here on Instagram as well. And Karen Isaacs, I see your comment on YouTube, which I'm going to get to in a second. Let me first explain a little bit about my system. In the mind-body community, there's many different people, practitioners, such a great community, and a lot of them provide all kinds of great resources, ideas, ways of thinking about things. What I found, though, is that I needed a mix of things to get better, and some of these things I actually basically had to invent for myself in terms of a system that would work for me. So here's what I found out. As I started reading about this, I discovered the emotional side of things, where Dr. Sarno pointed out that a lot of these long-standing physical conditions, including my back pain — he was a specialist, especially in back pain — related to some emotional processes. Now, that is true, but in some ways that can be a bit misleading. What I found is that symptoms like back pain, they have an onset that is emotional. It relates to an unconscious emotion. We're not aware of it, and the symptom is there to distract from that. But the thing that makes it stay there is our thought process. Because when you start to have pain or other symptoms, you start to think, what's wrong with me? Will I get better? Right? And so that thought process continues, and you start to get scared. And then your body starts to act like it's in danger, and it keeps up things like muscle tension and things like that. So there's actually different reasons that symptoms happen. What I found in investigating is that there's actually 3 main reasons for symptoms. Dr. Sarno was right about virtually everything that he said, but I built on what he said and got a lot of information out of some of the things he said, even in passing. He was right about the fact that emotions can cause some of these symptoms, but what I found is that that's mostly true for the acute onset and uptick in symptoms. The function of the symptom there is to distract from the emotional distress we don't want to know about. The symptoms are very distracting. I mean, I can tell you, having back pain it distracted from everything. It dominated my whole life. And a lot of these symptoms do. So you don't think it's happening for an emotional reason, and you don't get in touch with that. Part of my system is to develop ways to discover those emotions so you can bring down those and control those acute onsets and upticks in symptoms. The second function of symptoms, let me actually get into my system and explain that. When I meet with people, I used to tell them to take out a sheet of paper and divide it into 3 columns. These 3 columns, they delineate these 3 different symptom functions and how to work with them. So the emotions column goes along with what Sarno said. It is designed to help you figure out, how am I going to discover these emotions so that you can do it and get control of those symptoms. The doubt column is about your thinking. It's not about the feeling. It's not about unconscious feeling. It's more about what you're thinking perpetuates what happens in your body. The function of those symptoms is actually just to keep doubt going as much as possible and to spread out as far as possible. Why does it do that? It's basically preparing for more trouble. It thinks there's trouble. It's going to prepare for more. It wants to have all that ground. Okay. By the way, CJet, I see you said you're a newbie here and so excited to learn. I'm excited to have you. Please don't hesitate to ask questions as I lay out this system and how it works. It's a lot to take in at first, but I've also developed it in such a way that I can answer it very simply just to get you the basic ideas and get you, moving in the right direction. So let me know what you need, okay? The third column is called the power column. And the power column is about your relationship with you. The function of those symptoms is to communicate something about what's going on in your broad psychological life. So again, the emotions column is about these sharp emotional moments of the moment that you don't want to know about. It's a distraction function for the symptoms. The doubt column is about thinking, and the function is to keep it there. Just keep it going, grow doubt. If we combat the doubt, those symptoms go away, and that breaks up symptoms that are seemingly chronic, just like my back pain. Once my doubt came down, the symptoms really started to shift. The power column is about symptom plateaus, where the symptoms are kind of low level, but they're just hanging around. And that's because there's some conflict within the self. The power column is designed to get you the communication of whatever the symptom is trying to tell you. If you receive the communication, the symptom function is eradicated and you can move right on and those symptoms go away. So 3 symptom functions, 3 columns to deal with it. And there are tasks within each. They're not very complicated or wide in their variety. And as a result, I can get you guys relief from any symptom function because that covers the entire territory. I'll have to convince you all of that, but that's what I have found. All right, let's get into some questions here. Thanks for your patience as I explain things, especially for new people. It's really important. Okay, Karen Isaacs says, want to delve more into what you meant by, quote, metabolizing other people's anger and yelling. Okay, so Karen is referring to something that we discussed in my groups. And I wanted to describe that a little bit. On my website, www.crushingdoubt.org, there are various resources that you can dive into and get the right information. My teaching seminars are 8 sessions. They're 75 minutes long, and they are designed to tell you everything about mind-body work and how to think about mind-body thinking, why things do work, why they work for some and not for others, or for some people at certain times and not at other times. And the basic gist is those seminars are meant to bring down your initial doubt. But after that, I found people often need some help implementing the system. And that's what the groups are for. The groups are they're a lot like this in a certain way, but they are Zoom calls, and there's a lot of give and take in there because I can talk directly to you and I can find out more. I can ask questions. You can ask questions. We get a lot further in one sitting with the group. So Karen's in the group. And in the group, I said this thing about metabolizing other people's anger and yelling because she was having symptoms. And the timing of those symptoms suggested they were about the anger and yelling that was going on around her. So what I meant by metabolizing that, Karen, is shifting things within yourself through understanding so that you can have a different experience when that's happening. What ends up happening if you don't metabolize, we'll put in quotes again, and metabolize means to basically just be able to soak it in and put it in a place that can be handled. And If you don't do that, what ends up happening is you continue to have a trauma response and your body continues to do the same things again and again. And so then you're vulnerable every time somebody does that. But if we understand it deeply and we know what's going on in you and you've got a good relationship going on with yourself, which is power column work, by the way, then you could have a very different experience of it. Just as an example, I'm not saying this would happen right away, but as an example, Karen, you might find, oh, yes, they're yelling. And this reminds me of these times in my life that were very unpleasant and I didn't like them. And by being in that place with yourself, you're on your own journey and you're not as invaded by the people who are doing the yelling right there. So I hope that can be a start to things. I see, Karen, you said that was helpful. So say more about it as needed, Karen. But bottom line is, as we begin to understand what does that actually mean for you, that will be part of metabolizing. Okay. And we'll keep at it in group. I'm really glad you're there. All right. And Chris said, great question. Oh, let me get this loaded up. Great question, Karen. Love the question. Feel that myself. Okay, Chris. So same thing. We're going to find out what that means for you. And we're going to find you new solutions. Once we identify a problem, the columns identify problems, but then we choose action steps. What are we going to, and action steps, by the way, are usually action steps of thought. What are we going to do to live differently? And by identifying the problem so clearly, and the fact that I have lots of ideas about how to shift things, my background as a psychologist helps with that. It's not exactly therapy; it's educational, but we implement different action steps that can really help. Okay, I'm going to say hi to a couple more people who have joined. Scotty Styles is here. Thanks for joining us, Scotty, and saying hello. Adam Coloretti is here. Thanks for joining us. Catherine Toomer, good to see you. And Wild Zephyr Studios is here as well. Good to see you. That must be Zephyr. Good to see you. I know him. All right. So a couple questions coming in from Instagram. Scotty Style says, is hip dysplasia something that we can say is a structural issue and not neuroplastic? Okay, so as you guys probably know, I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't make claims about medical things so much. However, I'm also not shy about saying what is a kind of known mind-body condition. And if it is a known mind-body condition, it doesn't matter if I'm not a doctor. And you know why? It's because I actually am relying on doctors. I'm still relying on medicine to determine what's structural versus what is mind-body. So usually what I do with a medical issue, if I don't know about it, is I'll just Google what it is, and I'll often consult with a mind-body doctor. But hip dysplasia is when the hip joint is too shallow for the socket. And I don't know, but it seems like there can be structural issues about that. However, I'm very suspicious. And the reason I'm very suspicious about it is that so many issues that seem like that you hear, oh my God, the socket doesn't fit or something. It sounds bad and it sounds structural. I just want to encourage you, Scotty, that I would guess that most of these cases, unless they're really severe, are going to be mind, body, and nature. And this is the kind of thing that, the kind of structural thing that gets the blame, we'll say, or the explanation for the symptoms. I would want to consult with a mind-body doctor to be sure, or even just a regular medical doctor and see what they say. But I do want to put in a plug for the fact that lots of medical doctors are going to say, oh, yeah, that's a problem. Let's check this out, because I was told herniated discs were a major problem by many doctors. And it turns out they're not. The science shows they have no correlation to the pain. I was shocked by that. I was even more shocked when I found out that arthritis does not correspond to pain. There's plenty of people with arthritis all over their MRIs, no pain. Plenty of people with lots of pain, no arthritis. There's not a correlation between them. And when I was growing up, arthritis and pain were two words that I would just link automatically. So I would say with hip dysplasia, my guess is that most of those cases are going to be mind-body. Just because I'm not a medical doctor, I'd want a medical doctor to check it out and see. But I would want to take it with a grain of salt if it wasn't so certain, and we can look into the medical literature and see what they say. Okay, Scotty, let me know if that helps. But your question was, though, Is hip dysplasia something that we can say is a structural issue and not neuroplastic? Neuroplastic meaning mind, body, and the brain can be changed to alter this. I would guess most of it's actually neuroplastic in that definition. Okay, Scotty, let me know if that makes sense. Okay, CJet then says, I know about John Sarno. I have his books, but haven't read them, sadly. Thank you for retelling your story. Okay, so CJet, I cannot recommend highly enough reading that Dr. Sarno's books. If you're an avid reader, I would read his latest book, The Divided Mind. It's his most complete work. His thinking had evolved the best at that point. They're all excellent, every single one of them. But if you're not much of a reader, you can actually read a really short one called Mind Over Back Pain. And it's not, you could say it's not only about back pain, you can apply it to most symptoms, certainly pain symptoms, but most symptoms. And you can get a lot out of it. I highly recommend it. And then if you want to talk more about it, I can tell you more about my story. I can tell you more about how I've expanded things and why. And I promise you we can get relief. That's one thing I can say, and we can talk more about why. Okay, Rudemaster27, thank you for joining us here. CJ then said, I truly believe it's 80% emotional. Okay, so that's already a good start. And I think we should keep talking about it. We can get you to a place where you can either believe it's 100% emotional, or you can at least believe it's 100% mind body, because some of that's not emotions necessarily, could be thinking. But part of my work is to help people recognize when they're thinking it's a physical symptom in any percentage, even 1%, if it isn't. Because if they're thinking that, their doubt is still high and it's going to perpetuate the symptoms. So obviously, I'm just getting to know you. I'd have to hear more about your story, but mind body symptoms are so rampant that most cases of almost everything are mind body. Obviously, we want to be careful, go to a doctor to make sure. But as soon as they rule out life and death stuff, you can start considering a mind body conceptualization. I hope that makes sense. And please do let me know. All right. Let's jump in with Chris Atwater. Good to see you, my friend. Okay. Chris says, we talk about cuts and escapes at home. Cut from this and escape to that. One of my major cuts was to go from a tough situation and escape through sports, real and fantasy. I now am feeling these are triggering me. It is a bit weird, but these things now make me anxious. Aha. I got lots to say about this, Chris. Hang tight. So then he says, it has nothing to do with the competitive nature. I used to wake up and read the sports pages. Now they just get me worked up. That used to be the case with the news, so I shut that down. I am probably one of the least informed people in the world, but I hate cutting sports out as well. Okay, so I actually think it pays to be fairly uninformed these days, because there's so much fear in the air. Now, Chris, I hear what you're saying. Now sports is doing that somehow. Here's what I want to do first, okay? I want to find out the information you have. When I work with all of you, one thing that I'm very aware of is that I need information from you to help you. It's one of the reasons I do the groups and why the groups are particularly effective. You can get information from me, and that can bring down your doubt. And I have lots of good information to give. But if I'm going to help you, I have to change your specific mind. And that means I need to know what's going on specifically. So, Chris, I want to ask you, what's happening? What kind of thoughts are you having? As an example, I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm just putting it out there as an example. You might be saying to yourself, oh my God, this was a point of enjoyment for me, but now I'm not enjoying it. So now I don't have this, and now I'm in even more danger. If that is the thought, then that's the thought we need to deal with. But I'm pulling that out of thin air. So that might not be the thought at all. You might instead be thinking, I used to love sports, but now I'm noticing certain things about them that I'm not comfortable with, and that bothers me. And now my comfort zone has, been taken away in some way. That's another kind of thought. So what I want to do is pinpoint the thought. Now, in the doubt column, there's 3 things that we do. They're all bunched together in one basic activity. But when we're trying to look at doubts, we observe, articulate, and counter. To observe a doubt is to see that we're having a doubt, meaning to call it into question, to stop thinking it's just true. For example, you could think, oh my God, I'm going to have this pain for the rest of my life. That's a doubt. But if you don't see it as a doubt and you're worried it's actually true, you're not observing the doubt. You're just having the doubt. We want to have you not have the doubt. We want to have you observe it and look at it. Now, once you observe it, you can get it articulated, put into words. That's what I was asking Chris to do here. And partly it's for me because if I'm going to help him, I need to know what he's thinking. But if we can get it articulated and put into words, Chris, that's when we know the specifics. And that is when I can start to counter with you. Countering is to bring in science and logic so that we can get this question kind of wrestled to the ground and settled. I can guarantee you're going to be able to enjoy sports if you want to. You're going to be able to enjoy other things if you find that's not enjoyable to you anymore, and you're going to be okay either way. You're not stuck with anything, but I need to help you think through what is it you're thinking so that we can deal with what's going on in your mind. Otherwise, I say some nice things about why you don't have to worry, and you go on your way and continue to worry because you got your brain doing what it's doing. So let's find out more. Chris, if you don't mind, I know you're an open book, and I appreciate that about you. Share more about what you're thinking, and we'll go from there. Okay. All right. Dorisa says, "Hi, Dan and everyone." Dorisa, it is good to see you here. Just making sure I didn't miss anything. Chris said hi to you, Dorisa. Just saying hey back. Okay. So Karen, you had said that what I said was helpful. I'm glad about that. Follow up as needed. Okay. Now, Scotty Style says, "Thank you. That's helpful." Okay, happy to help, Scotty. And that was about the hip dysplasia. Again, I love to have a doctor, at least one, if not more than one, rule things out or at least weigh in. But I do something that I tell my group to do. I put on what I call my doubt armor. And what I mean by that is I'm going to go to the doctors to find out if there's a life or death thing, but I'm also going to be skeptical of when they say, "Oh, you've got a structural issue." Because I've learned my lesson. I've been told I have a structural issue, and it kept me essentially crippled for 8 years. Those doctors could have helped me if they weren't saying that kind of stuff, and their own medical journals have debunked it. So I was completely baffled when I found out all of this stuff. And that's why I highly encourage people, everyone. I mean, Sarno to me should be taught in high school. Everybody should know about it. Certainly should be taught in medical schools, 100%. And I'm working on getting society to change and understand this so that it is taught. My own book, which I'm continuing to work on, people know it's been a while, but writing a book takes some time, especially if you want to get it right, is going to be part of that process of convincing a lot of people. So let's make sure that people read up on this, learn about it. And that way, when you go to doctors, you can put on that doubt armor and say, "Okay, I'll listen to you if you're telling me that I've got a blockage in my arteries and I could have a heart attack. I'm going to listen to that. If you're saying that I have cancer, I can't treat that with mind-body issues, though I do think that mind-body issues can potentially help be preventative. I can say more about that. There are studies that show that adverse childhood experiences are and unprocessed trauma are major factors in autoimmune issues. So it may be something we can prevent, but we've got to be very careful to treat things medically when they cross over into that medical line. So I go to doctors for that, but I put on my doubt armor to think, yeah, but are you actually factoring in the fact that a lot of these structural issues are not the issue? And are you factoring in the mind body experience? And almost always they aren't. However, I will say this, I've been very pleased to see doctors are seem to be more open to that and even more aware of it. What they don't know is what to do. They don't even know how to interact with the patient around it because they don't know what to do. I mean, it would be hard to interact with somebody when you don't know what to do. So the field of psychology, the field of psychiatry, doctors in general, we all need to come together. Physical therapists, all of these different modalities need to come together to see how does the mind and body work together. In fact, that's been part of the problem, is that there's no one field to address this except the mind body field, and even that is extremely varied, and every individual comes from usually one background professionally. So a lot of work to be done here. We'll keep on it. All right. Okay, CJet says, "Thanks so much. Yes, I agree. It's 100% mind body." Wow. I vow to start one book tonight. That's fantastic. If I moved the needle in this discussion towards even just the possibility that this is 100% mind body, then you're already in better shape than you were in terms of really being able to alleviate this. Once I became convinced, I got better fast. And not only did I get better fast, I started to get control over all sorts of things. So we will talk more about this as needed. Ask your questions. Keep up the follow-up questions. And once you do that reading, or really at any point in time, CJ, you can reach me, dan@crushingdoubt.org, and send me an email. If you keep them on the short side, I get back faster, but I do want people to feel that they can access me. And on my website, www.crushingdoubt.org, that's where the seminars are. If you're up in the middle of the night and you're not sure what you can do about this, I don't want you to be alone with that. There are resources. You can watch these videos. They're pre-recorded of me going through this whole seminar. You can get started anytime you want. The membership groups, meanwhile, are 3 days a week: Mondays, 5 p.m. Eastern, Wednesdays, 12 p.m. Eastern, and Fridays, 2 p.m. Eastern. And the groups, it's such a great group. The people there are wonderful. It's supportive. It's informative. And one great thing about it is you're not just learning when you ask your question. You're also learning when other people ask their questions, which is happening here as well. But there we can get even further with everybody. Okay, CJ, I'm excited you're getting started on that, though. Jazz Sax Sailor, thanks for joining us here. I see you have a question or comment, and I'm going to get into that in a second. Let me just note if I missed anything over here on YouTube. Okay, so Jazz Sax Sailor says, Dr. Dan, thank you for taking the time to answer my question about core narrative on last week's Q&A. I also just found your trauma processing video from 6/22. Good stuff there. Thank you for the kind words. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I think it's incredibly crucial. In fact, I was talking to a sufferer not too long ago, and she was really asking me, so how does it work? And I said to her, listen, I know it may sound silly, but I actually just have to answer your questions to your satisfaction. They have to be good answers. If you're not getting good answers, it doesn't help. But for me, I read Sarno. It answered a lot of my questions. Then I went to see a psychologist that he trained, Eric Sherman, and I asked him probably 200 questions in one sitting. I had so many questions. At least it felt that way to me, 200. I got a lot of questions answered, and he answered most of them very, very well. And as a result, I felt much more confident. So that was the birth of the doubt column. That is the birth of this Q&A. So I'm happy to be providing it, guys, and thank you for the gratitude and kind words, Jazz Sax Sailor. And we can talk more as needed. Keep asking your questions, okay? Thank you so much. All right, Jane Smith, good to see you here. Jane says, hi, Dr. Dan and Teresa and everyone. Thanks for working on your book. My pleasure, Jane. Looking forward to having it done and getting it out there to you all. I hope there will be an audio version. There absolutely will be. It will not be there right away. I need to finish the book. We've got to get the publication process underway. Then I will be recording an audio version, so it will be there. And then Jane said, because I'd love to have your voice in my pocket. That's very sweet of you, Jane. It's interesting, though. I understand that. And Jane, you've said this directly yourself, that the sound of my voice can help. And that's partly because you're used to my voice being helpful. And so for a lot of people, our bodies are revved up because we've had a lot of trauma in our lives. We're used to scary things happening, upsetting things happening. We're used to people not responding well to us. This happens all the time to many, many people. And when you encounter somebody who actually helps you feel safe, that starts to lower that central nervous system. This actually is part of why therapy is a thing. It's part of why it can work. Now, sometimes therapy can go on and on endlessly looking for emotional stuff when really there's a thought process happening. This is why the columns are helpful. It's not just the emotions column. It's not just look at the emotions and find out about that, though that is important. It's also, but what are you thinking? And how can we counter what you're thinking? How can we make you certain about something else that feels better? How can we alter your relationship with yourself in that power column? 3 different options, much more useful than your average therapy or even mind-body work, if you ask me. So we've got to get you guys answers. And, if you have processes that bring down that central nervous system and help you with your doubt, that opens the door to understanding the other columns. I say this all the time, but if there is doubt, we work in the doubt column first, every time. Jen Rausch, by the way, I want to say hi to you on Instagram. Thanks for joining here. So if there's doubt, we've got to get to that first, because if doubt is there, we're not going to be able to think straight, especially if it's fear. Fear is one of the forms of doubt. The forms of doubt I'll go over right now. It's fear. That's the kind of highest, most intense kind of doubt. Then there's confusion. where you're less afraid, but you still have no idea what's going on. Then there's a lack of certainty where, okay, you're not so confused, but you still don't know for sure. And if you don't know for sure, it's often hard to fully relax. And then there's simply questions. Questions are not bad, but they are a form of doubt. I'm not saying that as bad news. They're what I call the gold standard of doubt. They're the doubt that is the most workable, where you can put it on the table with me or with yourself and think about, what am I actually asking? What do I actually need to know to feel certain and to get this? So we're always trying to move doubt towards questions, and then we're trying to get those questions answered. Jen Roush, thanks for saying hi. Really good to see you here. Rita has joined us. Rita LaBarbera is a great mind body coach, and she's actually trained with me. I'm actually starting a new training this week. If anybody's interested, they can email me, dan@crushingdoubt.org. We have a nice group going, and I train them in this system. And it doesn't have to be just psychologists or doctors. You can be a layperson who's just as interested in doing this and wants to do some coaching where you're sharing the information. That's what Rita does. She's exceptional. One of my favorites. And thanks for being here, Rita. And thank you for the flowers as well, the virtual flowers that you offered on Instagram. Okay. Jane then said, I figured out my pain is driven by a lot of tension caused by feeling that my needs conflict with each other and not knowing how to resolve that. Help? Okay. So great question. But I want to say something that I think not only can be encouraging for you, but for everybody here. Jane, when she first came here, we worked on doubt. And doubt is something we're always working on. I'm always working on doubt. I keep it on kind of a low hum. Am I having doubt? Where can I kind of crush it? What needs to happen here? But your doubt has come down enough that you're able to get to some certainty about some things. And what I hear you saying is you are now certain that your pain is driven by a lot of tension, and you're even pinpointing what that psychological tension is about. So the fact that you've identified the problem is a huge leg up. Now, when you ask the question, help, you're asking, what do I do about it? And I understand that. That's the action step part of it. But what this is showing is you've already used the columns to unearth the information. That's what the columns are really for. They are a description of how human beings work, and they're an organizing system to understand ourselves. But they're also an investigative system. They're a system that can help us find the problem. We've done that. You identified it. You have put it into words. This is great. I'm sorry you're having it, but now we can work on resolving it. So let's get into this. She says, help. She's saying a lot of the tension is caused by feeling that my needs conflict with each other and not knowing how to resolve that. So one of the things that I would recommend, Jane, is we actually need to help you see when one need is the primary need. It can be very confusing when we have multiple needs. What I want to do is look at an individual moment. This is big in my whole system. The idea of moment-to-moment thinking. We're never the same person at any given moment. We're changing all the time. So a lot of the systems and treatments that are being brought to us, they don't factor that in. So they try to, some of them do, but not super well, as far as I'm concerned. Some of them don't do it at all. They just say, do this, do this, do this, over and over and over. But we're not always the same. So we can't do the same thing all the time. The columns allow a flexibility to change what we do when. They also allow us to discover more information. So now, Jane, now that we know this basic idea, we now need to discover the basic information or the next level of information about what are those needs and how are they conflicting and when are they conflicting? Because you may find that they actually don't always conflict. Sometimes it may be like, no, that's the one. Here's an example. Insomnia. Insomnia tends to bring up conflicting needs. Sometimes people think, I got to get to sleep. I got to get to sleep. And then other times people's minds are racing. I got to do this and I got to do this. Those are two conflicting needs. What you're going to need to figure out in that moment is which need is bigger right then. Which one is the one that needs to be addressed? And I'll tell you, sometimes when I have insomnia, I get up and work because that need is stronger. Other times that need for rest is stronger and I find a way to put away whatever I need to work on. It might be to make a list, or it might be to recognize I'm not enjoying the bed. What we need to do is figure out that moment. So I want to encourage you. This is huge that you recognize the connection between the tension and your emotional experience. It's also huge that you've identified a very specific aspect that's been hard for you. My guess is that, and because there's a conflict within the self, this is actually going to be power column work in large measure. But we need to figure out what those needs are. And if you can have a very clear sense of what your needs are, you're going to be able to determine which moment is for what. In the power column, I do something called the core narrative. Jane, you know about this. Many people know about this, but this is an exercise that develops 3 sentences that are meant to describe your central, broad emotional experience so that you can really understand yourself very well at every moment. And through that lens, you're going to be able to understand your moments and what you need better. So, Jane, we could go about it in 2 different ways. This is power column work, though. We could look at the core narrative and see what is it you need overall. The other task in the power column, because there's 2, creating the core narrative is one, and the other is assessing for power and adjusting. I actually think that one's going to be even more key for you in the question that you just asked. I think there are ways in which this conflict between, different things you want to do decreases your power in some way, and you feel like there's no way out. If we can resolve that through understanding what would be the powerful move, we're going to get you help here. As always, though, I want to say my answers make sense to me, and that's good. But if they don't make sense to you, it doesn't help that much. So I want follow-up. Did that make sense to you, Jane? And for everybody who's watching also, you can ask questions about what I said to other people. Okay, now Jane did say, yes, I definitely identified my pain is driven by the power column. Perfect. So you're getting the columns. It's going to keep helping. And now let's have you follow up on what I said in terms of getting that information. Okay. Now, Chris is sharing more. I had asked him to share more, and he so graciously did. So I'm going to read this and see what we've got on the table. Chris said, I guess the thought I'm having is I feel strongly that when we are in a good space, our left brain creates something new to worry about and makes doubt. Doubt will keep coming. That's true. I'll say more about it in a little bit. Let me read everything that he said, and then I'll comment. Additionally, so much of sports coverage has turned negative. This person did this person did that, etc. For instance, the situation in Maine, my home state, this past week, and I have no interest in discussing this, but everybody who knows me wanted to talk about it. How close was this to my home? How do I feel, etc.? I will give my mom a rare kudos for not bringing it to my attention. She would usually send me that. But a lot of this is so shock jock at this point, which I hate. It looks like people judging other people, and I feel sorry for them both. Damned empathy. So I do want to say empathy, there's a lot of very good qualities that can lead to mind-body symptoms, and empathy is at the top of the list. All this stuff we feel, if we're empaths who just feel everything, it's a lot to deal with. In fact, that relates to what Jane was saying in terms of conflicts of needs. When you're feeling everybody's needs, your conflicts of needs are all over the place, not just within yourself, but even with everyone else. It becomes a big burden. However, you're not stuck with anything. We can take who you are and how you work and how your mind works and find new ways to channel it in the right direction. I can explain more about that. But one of the things that I found is I'm still every bit as empathic as I used to be, if not more. And yet I also know when to switch it off or when to see it differently. I used to empathize with everything, and I would empathize even with people who weren't even feeling bad themselves. I mean, I used to go to a restaurant, and if somebody was eating by themselves, it was just painful for me. And they might have been enjoying it. That's the crazy thing. So we can get more into that another time, Chris. But the bottom line is we have to help you feel that these qualities within you are not going to leave you stuck. There are adjustments we can make, including empathy, though that is a great observation. Now, let me jump back to the beginning of what you were saying. I do want to say hi to Nelly Alchemy. Thanks for joining us on Instagram. Okay, so you said, I feel strongly that when we're in a good space, our left brain creates something new to worry about and makes doubt. So I do want to encourage you all. Your brain will be trying to generate doubt all the time. Doubt is a psychological defense. It is meant to protect you from danger. But I'm putting danger in quotes because a lot of times there is no real danger. But the system is designed to keep producing doubt so that it can always be there. Ultimately, this is what knowing these columns does. we become certain, we become a lot less anxious about things. Things seem clear. We know what we're going to do about a lot of things. And then there's a lot more room to not have doubt, to not have it crash in so much or be so dominant. So I want to encourage you, Chris. Doubt may be saying to you, well, there's always going to be something. That's not true. Let's observe that doubt. It is true that there's always going to be something and that your brain is very active, but it's not true that you're always going to have doubt that's going to bother you. Now, that may not even be what you were thinking, but I do want to counter that doubt if that was there. It's not always going to be there in this form. And in fact, in the time we've been working together on this, I've seen your doubt come down a lot. Think about how far we've come. And if we can do that more, it's going to be even better. So we'll keep it up. Now, you were saying about sports coverage turning negative and that kind of ruining, or I don't know if I'm using that word, but infiltrating your experience of it and maybe making it less enjoyable. Now, I actually don't know what this news about Maine, so I can't ask you about it and wouldn't anyway because you told me you wouldn't want to. But I think the idea of negativity, the idea of being locked into talking about something, it was a revelation to me to recognize I don't have to talk about something I don't want to. I could even just tell somebody I don't really want to talk about it. It triggers me. It gets me all upset. That was a big revelation to me to not, because I was always a big people pleaser. I still am a people pleaser. I'm not going to change who I am, and I don't even want to. But I don't people please in ways that are so devastating to me all the time. And that means I have more options. So by understanding myself, I've opened up more options. I don't have to do some of the things that I really don't want to do. And I can make an action step that works better for me. So the idea of saying, yeah, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't want to talk negatively. Chris, you'll really appreciate this because you and I are very similar this way, but I run a basketball league, and the reason I run it is because I really wanted to run it in the way that I wanted to. And listen, there were some things that were just for me. When I used to play basketball, I used to get intimidated very easily because so much of the game was a kind of trash talking and trying to get in people's heads. And I hate that. I truly hate it. I think that it is a very negative influence on people. I think that it does far more damage off the court even than it does on the court. And people think, oh, it's just a game. It's not just a game if it hurts you for months afterwards. And for a lot of people, that was true. And that was true for me too. So when I started running this league, I decided the rule of thumb in this league is we are going to build each other up no matter what's happening. We're not going to get negative. Eventually, I came up with a name for it. It's called the Net Positive Hoops Association. The pun, obviously, with the nets. But the idea being, let's build each other up. So you could, Chris, decide, okay, the coverage is negative. There's not much you can do about that. Maybe you take in less coverage, but maybe you start to find the positive sports stories or the sports that are moving in more positive directions and pay more attention to those. Or maybe you have conversations with people who are more positive. A good example is I actually really, historically, though I haven't been doing it much lately, I used to love watching tennis, especially when announcers were positive about both players in singles. I'm usually watching singles. And there was something about appreciating both players at the same time and just appreciating the fans. It's a sport that has a little more appreciation in it, generally speaking, I find. And so I gravitate towards that. But I want you to know you can put your stamp on this so that you're not really stuck with it, and you can put in boundaries and say, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to get into negativity. I started doing that about politics and news because there's so much negativity everywhere, and I just didn't want it. Okay, Chris, let me know if that makes sense to you and gives you enough to go on. You did have a follow-up. There's a big tie into sports football for what happened, but a lot of it was positive. That was nice to see. Okay, that's good, Chris. Well, let me know what you think about what I said, and we'll go from there. Okay? All right. Then Jane Smith says, yes, what you said made total sense and makes me feel so much better right now already. I'll see how far I can get this week with your feedback. That's great. You've made such good strides. You're seeing it all, and you really are understanding the columns well. So that, actually, you have a comment about that, so let me read that. I am really beginning to make sense of the columns, and I'm feeling more empowered regarding my pain. Thanks again for all your help, Dr. Dan. Okay. Thank you so much, Jane, for the kind words and for that good news. Makes my day to know that you're doing better because of this. and even just that you're doing better. But I do want to put in a plug for something here that she's identifying, which is the columns are this interesting combination of deep and detailed and simple at the same time. They're simple where they need to be so that I can actually convey the concepts and get you to start thinking about it. But they have complicated complicated is not a good word. They have nuanced aspects to them so that they can be flexible and get a lot of different kinds of things done. But for many people, it takes a little while to sort out, okay, what does this all mean? The good news is, at least my goal is to describe this to you. The goal is to get it understandable. That's where we start. And Jane, that's where we started. We worked at it. You are now starting to see it. It's giving you a lot more confidence. You're going to be in a lot better shape soon. You may already be further along, significantly further along. And it sounds like you are. You certainly are in terms of your thinking. The thinking gets better usually before the symptoms. It doesn't have to take that long, but the key is understanding. Okay, Steph T114, thanks for joining us here, and Marnie Moore, thanks for joining us here. You're coming in right at the end of the session, and I'm sorry that I missed you, but I do want to encourage you. I'm here every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, here to answer your mind-body questions, to talk about my specific system, which is unique, and I used it. It describes how I got myself better. And then I found that it really worked for other people, and that's why I do what I do. But if you have questions in the meantime, you can send me an email at dan@crushingdoubt.org. You can come back here and ask questions as well. In addition, on my website, if you want to get information, you can go to www.crushingdoubt.org. You can get my teaching seminars, which teach all about mind-body issues, how to think about how they work, why they work the way they do, how to resolve certain contradictions you might hear about, why one thing works at one time and another at another time, or for certain people and not for other people. The seminars teach you all about that. And the membership groups are a time where you can come talk to me directly on a Zoom call. It's a fantastic group of people. And it's a lot like this Q&A, but we get so much further in one sitting. Not just for the person I'm talking to, but for everybody who is listening to the things because what it does is, Jane and I were just talking, the columns have clicked for her. But if you come to the group, the columns click faster because you get more practice with it. You get more practice hearing how other people are using it and the things that I say again and again. So if people have questions about it, please do let me know. Chris, I see you said thanks. Teresa said thanks as well. Thank you. Rita, I saw you said thank you a while back. That may have been in part because of the kind words I was saying to you, which are 100% true. But it's a joy working with you guys in this way. I love to get people answers. It's what I needed. I want to make sure to give it to you. Okay, then Jane Smith says, ha, yes, I think it took a long while for me to get the columns, but having your answers to my questions has been invaluable. Can't wait to see how this week goes. Thanks again. Very nice to see you excited about the week, Jane. It shows what happens when you feel like you understand what is happening. That makes us feel safe. And when we feel safe, that's when our central nervous system calms down. And that is when the symptoms start to change. That's why it's so important to understand. So guys, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always. I'll be here same time next week at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. And please keep your questions coming. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.